Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's a transgender round when I put Michael Sarne's Myra Breckinridge against Kimberly Pierce's Boys Don't Cry. And man, this was another hard decision because both of these movies are really great in their own right. So, I mean, let's just dive right on into the nit and the picky. The first up, we have Michael Sarne's Myra Breckinridge, which is based off of the novel by Gore Vidal, and it is about a man who transitions into a woman. And of course, we see Rex Reed plays the man Myron Breckinridge, and that opening sequence of his basically surgery is very surreal. Like it's on a par with some shit like Fellini would do. You know, it's very surrealistic. You know, but it also like kind of paints an accurate picture of that struggle. Now, mind you, disclaimer: I'm just a white cisgendered straight male, so I can't really like talk on any of this shit other than like what I've read and what I've heard people talk about. And watching this movie, it's like they're basically killing the man part of you and birthing the woman part of you in a weird sort of way. So it's like John Carradine plays the surgeon, with a cigarette dangling from his mouth. There's a lot of like tongue-in-cheek humor, and there's like an audience watching because it's kind of, even at this time, this was made like 1970. I think the book was written somewhere in the late 60s. This was still a rare occurrence. And so it's almost like a scientific curiosity, and of course, like Rex Reed always like he cracks a few jokes here and there and stuff, and then like full on becomes a woman. And you've got Raquel Welch playing the title character of Myra Breckinridge. And first of all, like I know Raquel Welch playing a trans woman is kind of absurd in and of itself, but the thing about Raquel Welch, she wasn't just one of the finest women to ever live. She like was a better actor than like people wanted to give her credit for, and she's playing this part brilliantly. The thing about Myra Breckinridge is it's real easy to just write it off as camp and or just bullshit, but the movie is very ambitious for what it was trying to do. Like I said, I feel like it paints an accurate portrayal because like from the shit I've read about the whole transgender thing, is like a multiple personality disorder, and we see that all through the film. Is like Myra Breckinridge goes to Hollywood to like take over her, which was Myron's uncle's acting school that Myron's mother owned or co-owned with her brother. And of course, the Uncle Buck is played by none other than John Huston, one of the greatest directors of all time, who's probably in probably his second most memorable role in a film. Of course, the most memorable has got to be his turn in Chinatown. But, he's brilliantly sleazy in this. And of course, you see other like faces pop up. Farrah Fawcett, before Charlie's Angels, she pops up in this, as well as Tom Selleck, way before Magnum P.I. And of course, the legendary Mae West is in this as like some kind of big mogul. If only those kind of moguls existed now, it's about time that a straight man can sleep his way to the top without compromising his ideals and stuff. But the film itself, like her whole intention is to try to overthrow the patriarchy in Hollywood and stuff, and kind of not just ascend to being a woman, but also just to conquer all genders and everybody. Basically kind of a fuck the world mentality that was very popular at the time this movie was made, but the subject matter kind of fucked a lot of people off. But if you kind of vibe with what they're trying to do, they're showing like basically that struggle, because there's points in time where like Myra kind of feels more like a man. That's when you see like Rex Reed pop up in the background a little, kind of either watching it or in the subconscious. It's a brilliant cinematic technique to kind of show the internal struggle of Myra Breckinridge. Of course, she does a lot of fucked up shit. The guy that Rusty is fucking brilliant too. The thing about it is like everybody in this movie is playing their parts fucking great. The Rusty character is kind of like if you tried to transition Ricky Nelson into Clint Eastwood, and that dude ends up getting pegged by Myra, basically robbing him of his manhood, that way she can steal his girl, which is played by Farrah Fawcett. This is kind of like, I guess you call it light lesbian scene, but it's really lesbian. There's a lot of layers to this film, and of course you see like the brilliant Calvin Lockhart's in this, playing a gay teacher, I get, or student, I get. There's a lot of lines that are blurred in this film, and it's batshit crazy. It's intercut with a lot of old movie clips from the 20th Century Fox library, but they're not random. They're actually put there as punctuations to jokes, or to like add another layer to the joke, or have more innuendo and stuff. Like I said, a very ambitious film. That's probably the closest that I've seen any American film really like get to the fucking essence of like what a Fellini film was, kind of blurring that lines of fantasy and reality, because the ending is kind of ambiguous. It kind of makes you think that, maybe Myron just killed himself because he couldn't be a woman, and he had this whole elaborate fantasy in his head, and it's alluded to because you got the fucking magazine with fine ass Raquel Welch on the cover of it. So there's a lot of shit to dissect in that movie, but at the end of the day, I think it does kind of paint an accurate portrayal of like the mental illness side of this identity, or what identity crisis or whatever. And moving forward to kind of the 90s, where like that began in the set, that was released at the beginning of the 70s. At the end of the 90s, Kimberly Pierce came out with Boys Don't Cry, which starred Hilary Swank as Brendan Tina, who is based on a true story that happened in Nebraska, and it's about a trans man. Hilary Swank does an amazing job, an Academy Award winning performance, just very heartbreaking, and then you got this woman that, feels like she's a man and does her best to like become a man as much as she can without getting the surgery, because this is a broke, hustling ass person, and she ends up in Falls City, Nebraska, or he ends up in Falls City, Nebraska. And, even his homie at the beginning of the movie kind of warns him, you keep, fucking around, somebody's gonna, because we see a whole group of people at the beginning trying to like basically lynch this motherfucker, because he's fucking chicks, but he's actually a chick. And, people tend to get fucked off by that, especially at the time that this story takes place. And, but then he ends up in Falls City, by accident, and ends up becoming friends with this real wacko motherfucker played by Peter Sarsgaard, who's, brilliant. All the performances are brilliant in this film. Chloe Sevigny gives a heartbreaking performance as the love interest. It's actually at the heart of it. It is a very beautiful love story. And for as dark and fucked up as this movie is, it really starts out like a fun movie, like a lot of, like something similar to Trainspotting, where like the first 30 minutes are, kind of fun in a way, very reckless. You see all this motherfucker do all kinds of stupid shit, all, at the warning of his friends, but he doesn't give a fuck. He just does his thing, and it ends up costing him his life, Now, the thing about it is, I can't really like talk too much shit about stuff that happened in real life. I can't say, well, they should have did this, they should have did that, and then the filmmakers did kind of like leave some stuff out of the actual story, but I feel like they captured the essence perfectly and showed like the horror of like, what these motherfuckers have to go through, because it is a struggle, where you want to call it mental illness, where you want to call it, destiny, whatever the fuck you feel like calling it. It still is a struggle at the end of the day. And I would argue that it's probably more like scary to be a trans man, because you're having to like, basically act like a man in a man's world. And, it is very dangerous. These motherfuckers end up raping him and killing him, and end up killing kill a woman right in front of her baby. It was real fucked up shit. And really nothing, I'm not saying the motherfucker deserved it, but had he not been lying to these motherfuckers, he probably would still have his life. You need to be more upfront. That's why education is important. A lot of stupid people in this movie, but there's stupid people in real life. That's what makes it all the more like resonant and shit, because like shit could have went a whole lot differently, but motherfuckers just can't get out of their own way. And I feel like Kimberly Pierce humanizes this struggle in a way that most like filmmakers and even the media won't even do. And of course, Hilary Swank, a phenomenal, like I said, phenomenal Oscar-winning performance. And it's a very dark, fucked up movie. And then again, so is Myra Breckinridge, but they manage to make it a comedy. They manage to do something that's like, serious but fucked up at the all time, because like at the same time that Myra Breckinridge is dealing with the transgender struggle, it's also dealing with another transition that's going on, and that is the old Hollywood and the new Hollywood. There's some really great scenes where like you see the old cowboys bitching about how like, they used to be the heroes of Saturday afternoon all over the world, and then now it's just trash, perversion, and pornography, and and homosexuals. That's their biggest thing. And I feel like this is where it comes down to the nit and the piggy. Like I said, it's a very hard decision because both films are great. I feel like both films treat their subject matter with a seriousness that most films don't. You don't really see too many transgender films that are not either propaganda or just straight trash sensationalism and stuff. But it also comes down to what is the better movie. And I would say, like I said, no complaints with either one of them. Even like showing the rape scene. Kimberly Pierce is a director that she's not trying to show rape in a sensational way. She's trying to show like how horrific this shit is and how this shit happens every fucking day, and really just and shows you the grief, because it's mostly close-ups. You don't really see a lot of fucking like what the shit that you don't really need to fucking see. I would argue you don't need to really film rape scenes at all. And even in Myra Breckinridge, there's a rape scene when Myra pegs Rusty, and that's done in an almost comical way, But at the end of the day, if we're going on a watchability scale, it's got to be Myra Breckinridge, because like Boys Don't Cry is an important film, but it's not the type of film you want to watch all the time. Like Myra Breckinridge, on the other hand, the more you watch it, the more shit that you notice, and you notice how brilliant it is. Like I said, it's real easy to write that movie off as camp, but it's actually pretty fucking brilliant. So this round goes to the 70s. Myra Breckinridge wins the round. For anybody keeping score, that is 55-45. 70s are up by 10, man. That lead just continues to grow. It looked like the 90s were coming back for a while, but man, the 70s are just fucking crushing it, because like a lot of their stuff, like specifically with Myra Breckinridge, way ahead of its time. You had these really ambitious filmmakers with material that would get laughed out of the studios, even 20, 30 years prior to the year this movie was made. And, and I guess even up to that point, the most serious one about like transgender shit was like Ed Wood's Glenn or Glenda. And this ain't no Glenn or Glenda. Like Myra Breckinridge is a fucking work of art. It deals with, not just transgender shit, but societal changes, and makes it a fun, entertaining movie that's very fucking hilarious. And like I said, though, Boys Don't Cry is a good movie too, but definitely not something you want to watch all the time. Definitely important to see though. And so if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. As you can see, don't take none of this shit seriously. I'm wearing a fucking tinsel wig, This is all just to satisfy my own scientific curiosity. So 55-45, 70s win this round again. They're up by 10. They're kicking ass and taking names. So stay tuned to see who else's ass gets kicked.